Namaste and a very good morning to all of you. I welcome you to my channel, The Outlier. My name is Mithu. In today's video, I'll be talking about how to create a data model using Microsoft Excel. Even before I proceed to demonstrate how to build a data model using Microsoft Excel, my request you to subscribe to my channel, also like and share my videos. Let's begin by asking a simple question. What exactly is a data model? Data model is the process of creating a relationship between multiple tables from either the same or different data sources. Why are we establishing a relationship between two data sets? We are establishing a relationship between two files because we want these files to communicate with each other. We want these files to talk to each other. Once these files talk to each other, it will be easy for us to generate a report or do some advanced analysis. Let me just give you an example. Suppose you have two files. In the first file, you have demographic variables, and the second file, you may have purchase details. If you want to establish a relationship between demographic fields and purchase details, you can go ahead and create a data model in which you can use customer ID as a common variable. So one of the important prerequisites for you to create a data model is that you need to have a common variable. That common variable is called as the primary key. Typically, it could be a product ID or consumer ID or customer name, which acts like the common variable between two files. Once you have a common variable, this variable can be used as a link variable to connect two data sets. Now, there are many tools which allows you to perform a data model. Excel is the obvious choice. Many times you can establish a link between two files using the VLOOKUP function. However, we will not be using the VLOOKUP function. We will be using what is called as the PowerPivot option in Microsoft Excel. PowerPivot option is not something which is new. It has been in the market for the last 12, 13 years. Besides Excel, you can also use SQL or Power BI to perform a data model. First things first, let me show you how to use the option Power Pivot. You can see here in the menu, there's an item which is called as Power Pivot. Now, this option might not be present in Microsoft Excel when you open a worksheet. Now, this is because you have to use the add-in. Once you're able to add in, this Power Pivot option will be enabled in Microsoft Excel, and the Power Pivot option can be used to build a data model. To enable the Power Pivot option in Microsoft Excel, let me go on to the File menu. In the File menu, the last option here is Options. You can click on Options. You can see here, this will fire open a new window. The name of this window is called as Excel Options. To the left side, you have a list of items like General, Formulas, and Data. I'll go ahead and click on the last but one option, namely Add-ins. This will allow me to add in certain additional functionalities. Once you click on Add-ins, look at the Manage section. In the Manage section, we can click on the drop-down menu. There are different items in the drop-down menu. We will go ahead and select the COM add-ins. So this is the second option from the top, the COM add-ins. We can choose the option COM add-ins and click on the Go button. You can see here in the COM add-ins section, there are three add-ins that gets displayed. The first one is Microsoft Data Streamer for Excel. We don't need this. The second option is Microsoft Power Map for Excel. Again, we don't need this. We need the third option, namely Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. I repeat, the third option is Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. Make sure that you put a tick mark in this checkbox and click on the option OK. I've already enabled this, so there's no point clicking on OK again. So I'll just choose the option Cancel. Once you enable the Power Pivot option, you should be able to see this particular item in the menu bar. So you have the Power Pivot option. We'll be using Power Pivot option in a bit, but even before I proceed to show you what exactly Power Pivot does, may I take this opportunity to introduce to you the data set that I'll be working on. You can look at the first data set. The first data set, as you can see here, has demographic data worksheet. You can see at the top, the file name is demographic details. What are the variables that are present in this particular file? You have 7 variables. The first is customer name. Second variable is segment. Third, you have country. Fourth variable is city. Then you have state, postal code, and region. Basically, what we have is the customer name followed by the demographic details that the customer operates in, right? It could be his state, it could be the city, the postal code, so on and so forth. So this gives you limited visibility. When I say limited visibility, you can see only the demographic details. This data set does not talk about what are the product details, which all product, let's say a person named Aaron Bergman has purchased, that is not present. That piece of information is not present in this particular file. If you want access to demographic details, what you can do is click on Excel. Let me open up the second file, which is called as product details. When you look at product details table, here you have multiple variables. The first variable is customer name. Nextly, you have product ID. Third is category, subcategory, product name, sales, quantity, discount, profit, and customer ID. These are some of the field names that we have in this particular data set. What is really interesting here is that in this file, namely file 2, you mostly have all the product details, but you do not have demographic details, right? We have very, very useful variables like sales, quantity, and discount, which can be used to aggregate the total value of sales or the number of quantities that have been purchased by the customer. But unfortunately here, I don't have demographic variables. The demographic variables are present in the first file. So here we have a curious situation wherein certain selected fields are present in the file 1, the other fields are present in file 2. Question is, can we build a relationship between these two data sets so that I have access to all the variables? It's like saying in the first file, you may have 5 variables. In the second file, you may have 5 new variables. Now, I may need to use both of these fields. I may need to use some of the fields from the first file and certain other fields from the second file. How do I do this? To do this, you can create a data model, make a link between these two files, make them talk to each other by creating a data model, and then you will have access to 5 plus 5, namely 10 variables. How do we begin doing this? First thing that you need to observe is that it is impossible to create a relationship unless you have a common variable. Which is that common variable? When you look at demographic details, the first variable, namely customer name, is the primary key. Now, this variable is present in the first file. Let me open up the second file, product details. When you look at product details, what you observe is, what do we observe here? We clearly observe that customer name is present even in the second file, namely product details. So we are going to use customer name as a common variable to link these two tables. Once these two tables start talking to each other, it will be easy for me to access fields from either of these files. Let me first examine the sample size in product details. If I select the entire column, you can see here there are 9,994 observations for customer. Let me move on to demographic details. Here, when you look at the customer name, the sample size here is 793, which means that there are 793 unique customers. We don't have any repetitions as far as demographic details is concerned. Let me close this particular file. You have the product details. I'll be closing this particular file as well. Let me begin with a clean slate. I have an empty worksheet. Now I will be importing both the files and establishing a link or a relationship between these two files. One more thing which I wanted to show you is that in the folder, you can see here, I have kept both these files, demographic details. Please observe the data type. This is a Microsoft Excel worksheet. Second file is product details. This is a CSV file, comma, separated values file. So though these variables, though these files belong to two separate data sources, we can still combine them. If I have to just give you a simple example, this is like if you have river water, which is the first source, and the second source of water could be lake water. What you're doing is basically you're taking 1 liter of river water, putting it in a bottle. And again, you're taking 1 liter of lake water and putting this in the bottle. Now, in the bottle, you have 2 liters, 1 liter that belongs to river water, and the second liter or the additional portion is basically coming from the lake water. Now, this is the data model. The container is acting like a data model which has the properties of both river water as well as the lake water. The same way here, you can compare river water to the first file, lake water to the second file. You are taking important fields from both these files and putting this in a data model. The container or that bottle is like the data model, which allows you to access both the files. To create a data model, let me show you this particular empty Excel sheet. The first step that we need to do is get the demographic data. How do you do that? Go to the data menu bar. The first option here is what is called as get data. When you click on the drop-down menu, the very first option here is from file. Under this section, I'll choose the first option, namely from Excel workbook. Remember, demographic details is an Excel workbook, and therefore I will be selecting the first option to import the file. This gives birth to a new window which is called as import data. In this import data, what you can do is you can please scroll down. You can go to a folder which is called as merge one. You can see here demographic details. This is the file which I will be selecting, and then I'll click on the import button which is present at the bottom right hand side corner. Now you have a new window. This window is called as the navigator window. You can see here demographic details is the name of the Excel file and the sheet name is demographic data. The moment I click on demographic data, what Excel does is it displays the original data set that we have. You can see here, it says column 1, column 2, column 3, which is a bit of an aberration because we don't want the names to be column 1, column 2, column 3. This is the first problem that we have. The second problem that we have is that the first row is marked as null. You can clearly see here, you have a lot of null cases here. The third row has the headers. What are these headers? Customer name, segment, country, city. So actually, the third row is the header name. The fourth row, namely Aaron Bergman, Aaron Hawkins, so on and so forth, is the starting point of the data. So we have two important problems here. That is, when we are trying to load this particular file, the first row has null cases and the column headers have not been correctly identified. So we would like to make certain modifications to the data set before importing and loading this in the connection. What is this change? You can see here at the bottom right hand side corner, there's an option called as load. Besides this, there's a small drop-down menu. When I click on the small drop-down menu, Excel displays two items, load and load to. We don't have to use the option load. We'll use the option load to. Now, the moment I click on the option load to, what do you observe? you observe is that we have a small dialog box, which is called as import data dialog box. This asks a simple question: select how you want to view this data in your workbook. Once you pull this demographic data into Excel, how do you want to view this? You have four important options. One is you can view this as a table. Second is you can view this as a pivot table report. Third is we can view this as a pivot table chart. And the fourth one is only create a connection. I'll go ahead and choose the fourth option, that is only create a connection. I'm interested in establishing a connection with the original source data set. I'm not actually going to populate the data set in the existing worksheet. So this is the first item that you need to select. You can also see here, there is a option that says add this data to the data model. Let me put a tick mark against this. This is add this data to the data model. So this data will be put into the data model. In the example that I gave you, we have two streams of water, river water and let's say lake water. I'm assembling the river water and putting this in an empty bottle. That empty bottle is like the data model. Once you have made these two selections, you can go ahead and choose OK. You can see here, there are 795 rows loaded. We still have a problem. The first row is null and the column heading has not been identified properly. If you want, we can go ahead and choose the option edit. Now this will give me an opportunity to eliminate the entire first row. You can see here, this first row is just null cases. We don't want the first row. So what I will do is I can go to this button, which is called as remove rows. Let me click on this particular option and say remove the top rows. Number of rows to remove, I can say first, only the first row has to be removed. You can click on OK. You can see here, the first row vanishes now. What is the second option that we need to provide? You can select the column. We have to specify customer name, segment, country as the column heading. I'm looking for an option, use first row as headers. You can clearly see here, use the first row as headers. There's a drop-down menu here. It says use the first row as headers. Once I click on this, now you see customer name, segment, country, city, so on and so forth are appearing as the column headers. This data is now neatly arranged. What you can do is you can choose the option close and load. Here there's a small drop-down menu. You have two options, close and load and close and load too. I'll just choose the option close and load. You can see the revision being made. Now it says that there are 793 rows that have been loaded under the section queries and connections. You can see clearly the customer name, segment, all of these things, customer name, segment, country are being highlighted as the column heading. The data is also clearly shown for each customer. Fantastic. So we have loaded demographic data. We have loaded this as a connection, but this does not occupy any space inside Excel. You can see here, the sheet is empty. It is completely empty, which means that this particular file has been loaded just as a connection. It is not occupying any space inside Excel. The data is stored in the data model. What about the second file? I'll follow the same procedure to import the product details. Let me again go to get data option from file. Here, the second option is from a CSV file. I like to pull the file from a CSV format. Let me go ahead and select the second item here. You have two files. One is what is called as order details, and the second one is what is called as product details. Let me select the file product details. When I hover the mouse here, clearly you can see this is in CSV format. Let me hit the import button. You can see here what Excel does is it displays the preview of the product details file. There are three options like file origin, the delimiter is comma, and Excel has understood that this is a CSV file, so it has by default chosen the comma delimiter, and you can see customer name, product ID, category, subcategory, product name, so on and so forth, based on the first 200 rows. This looks fine. I can go ahead and load this particular file. In the load option, like before, I'll choose the drop-down menu and choose the option load to. This is the second item. You can go ahead and select load to. This leads to a small dialog box, namely import data. I'll choose the fourth option, namely only create a connection. Here, I'll select add this data to the data model. Once you've made these two selections, you can go ahead and select OK. You can now see there are two files. The first is demographic data, and the second one is product details. The sample size for the first data set is 793 rows, and the sample size for the second file is 9,994 rows. So far, this is still a data set. We have two independent data sets. We have not actually linked them. Question is, how do we link these two files? How do we make these two files talk to each other? To make these two files talk to each other, we can use the PowerPivot option. Remember, this is the option which you had enabled by going to the add-in feature in Excel. So let me use the PowerPivot option. You have 5 important options here: manage, measures, KPIs, add to data model, and detect. Let me go ahead and click on this particular option, which is called as the manage button. What this does is it helps me go to the PowerPivot window. You can see here, this is the PowerPivot window for Excel. You don't see too much of a difference. More or less, you're seeing them just like two files. You have customer name, segment, country, so on and so forth. This is your demographic data. And when you click on product details, you again have customer ID and product details. What you are seeing right now is the data view. Besides data view, you have an icon which is called as the diagram view. Please click on the diagram view. So this is really, really interesting because you can see here, the moment you click on the diagram view, the demographic details are being displayed here. Similarly, the product details are displayed in the second list. Let me again remind you that this is just two independent files as of now. We have not built a data model. You can clearly see the first variable is customer name. The first variable from the second file, namely product details, is also customer name. Since we have a common variable, what we can do is we can select the first variable name, that is customer name, drag and drop it to that of customer name, which is present in product details. Now that we have established a relationship, now that we have established a link between these two files, we can go ahead and successfully claim that we have created a data model. This is a data model wherein we have linked two files, and these two files are now talking to each other. What you're seeing here is one, and then there is a connection. Here it says star, which basically means that we have a one-to-many connection. This is a one-to-many type of a join. Remember, customer name has 793 rows. These are all very, very unique. Each row represents one customer only. However, when it comes to product details, we can have multiple rows for one customer. So in the case of right-hand side, we can have multiple rows representing the same customer. But however, when you look at the first file, demographic data, it is absolutely important that you have every row which is uniquely representative of one customer. What you have done is a data model. So congratulations on creating our first data model in Excel. Now that you have created this link, you can go to this particular option, which is called as pivot table. Once you click on this, the first item in the list is a pivot table. There's a small dialog box. Create a pivot table in a new worksheet. Yes, I wanted to create a pivot table in a new worksheet. So let me go ahead and click on the option OK. Interestingly, in the pivot field section, you can see here, Excel displays the name of the first file, namely demographic data. So this is coming from the data source, demographic data. Right below this, you can see the second file. Let me just scroll down. You can see here product details. So you have two separate files. Now they are talking to each other. Let me go ahead and expand demographic data. You'll be able to see a lot of fields here. I'm interested in the field state. So let me drag and drop this along the rows. Again, let me remind you, the variable state is present in file 1. Let me pack up the variables under demographic data. You can see here, this is changing to, this is the name is displayed in bold, which means that we are using the fields of this particular file. If I scroll down, product details, this is the second file. I've not selected any particular field from this, and this is not highlighted in bold. Let me expand this section. Here, when I scroll down, you have different variables. I'll use the variable sales, drag this and drop it under the values section. You can include more variables as well in case you want to. Under the aggregate values section, you can include profit, discount. You have very, very useful variables. You can see here quantity is there, discount is there, as well as profit is there. But I want to keep it very simple for the purpose of this video. It's very clear. Sometimes if you use too many variables, it becomes cluttered. So here we have constructed a simple pivot table. What is interesting about this is that the first field, that is the state field, comes from the first file, and the second field is coming from the second file. Now, let me go back to the manage section. What you have done here is to create a data model using two data sources. Can we create a data model using the third source? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. We can definitely create a data model based on the third data source. Not just 3, we can use 3, 4, 5 data sources as well. Let me quickly show you how to revise the existing data model by creating a data model based on the third file. The name of the file is what is called as order details. You can see here, this is the new file which I'm showing, order details. In this particular sheet, I have customer name, and then I've got number of orders. Let me examine the sample size in this particular data set. You can clearly see here, there are 793 records here. So this again is very, very unique. The first customer is Aaron Bergman. He has ordered 6 items. Aaron Hawkins is the second customer, 11 items. Third customer is Aaron Smealing. He has ordered 10 items. So each row represents one unique record, right? So make sure that you have each row representing one unique record. Let me go ahead and close this particular file. I don't want to save this. I'll come back to sheet 1. You can clearly see here, demographic data as well as product details be displayed here. What next? The next step is to go to the data menu bar. In the data menu, as before, I can use the get data option to import the third file. Let me click on the drop-down menu. From file, here you can see the third file is a CSV file. So you can select the option from a text or CSV you would like to import the file. Once you click on this option, this leads to a new window, which is called as the import data window. There are two different files. One is order details and the second one is product details. We have already used product details. You can see here in the right side, we have already used product details and we have brought this in and loaded this as a connection. I'll now be loading order details, which is a CSV file. I can select this and choose the option import. You can clearly see here, customer name is appearing as the header. Number of orders is appearing as the header for the second column. There are different customers like Aaron, Bergman, so on and so forth. Here you have number of orders. It looks fine to me. The delimiter has been chosen as comma based on the first 200 rows. You can go ahead and load this particular file, but in the load section, I'll choose load to option. This opens a new dialog box, which is called as the import data section. As before, I'll select the fourth option, namely only create a connection, and I'll choose add this data to the data model. Only create connection and select add this data to the data model. Once you do this, go ahead and click on the OK option. You can now see here the third file is appearing. Earlier, you had only demographic data, product details, and order details. You have 793 rows which are loaded. There are two important points. I like to emphasize this again. This particular file, namely order details, we are loading as a connection. This does not occupy any space inside Excel. Second point is that the data is stored in the data model. Okay, how do we now create a data model using the third file? To create a data model using the third file, like before, we can click on the PowerPivot option. Now, under the data model section, you can use the manage item. Excel gives a short description for this particular option. It says, go to the PowerPivot window to load and prepare the data or continue working on data already added to this workbook. Let me click on the manage section. You can now see the diagram view. This is the diagram view. In case you want to go to the data view, you can go ahead and see the three files: demographic data, product data, and then you have order details. Let me switch back to the diagram view. I've already established a connection here between demographic data and product details. Now, the task is to establish a connection between product details and order details. How do you do this? Select customer name. Under order details section, also you are seeing customer name. We can establish a link between customer name, which is present in product details, with that of customer name that is present in order details. You can see here, star basically implies many, and here we have one, which means that there is a many to one linkage between product details and order details. What you have here is demographic details, product details, and order details. So this is a very complex data model that we have built by linking three files together. We have linked three files from two separate sources. The first file is an Excel workbook. The second one is a CSV format. The third one is again a CSV format. Let me go to the pivot table section. Here, I'll choose the pivot table option. New worksheet. Let me go ahead and select OK. Now, this is the pivot table section. You can clearly see here the first data, namely demographic data, is coming from the first data source. You can go ahead and select a few variables from demographic data. If you scroll down, Excel displays the second file, which is order details. You can go ahead and select files. Sorry, you can go ahead and select a few fields like customer name or number of orders which are present in order details. And lastly, what you have is product details, right? So you have 3 different files. You can specifically select variables from any of these 3 files, populate the rows, columns, and the value section, and construct a pivot table. I'll not be constructing a pivot table here because that was not the objective of this particular exercise. My objective was simply to show you how to link 3 different files and build a data model. As a result, what we have is that we have brought 3 separate files, Excel, CSV. We did not apply any VLOOKUP function. We did not use any complicated formula, or we don't have to remember any parameters, nothing of that sort, right? We just have to create the relationships in the PowerPivot and then get the output in PowerPivot in Excel. With this, I have come to the end of today's video. In today's video, we've seen what exactly is a data model and how do we create a data model using the PowerPivot option in Excel. Like I mentioned, PowerPivot is not something which is new. This has been part of Excel for the last 10-15 years at least. We've also seen some of the important prerequisites for the creation of a data model. I thank you very much for watching this particular video. I request you to subscribe to my channel, also like and share my videos. Thank you once again. Have a great day ahead.